This is episode 134 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Kristie Wolfe. Kristie built her first tiny house in 2011 as a social experiment for her own idea of living simply and deliberately. Now she is off on a journey where she's building handcrafted, one-of-a-kind experiences like, let me just give you a few examples before I let her speak, a treehouse in Hawaii, an underground hobbit hole in Washington, a fire lookout in the Idaho Panhandle, and a potato hotel in her hometown of Boise. And Kristie, where are you now? Because you're on site of something new right now. And welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm currently just left the inspector, getting ready to pour footings for a terrarium house. So it is a little tiny house inside of a greenhouse.
Oh, that's awesome. So let's go. You have a background in building, though, right? Is that how you kind of got into this when you started this?
It's not really how I got into it, but and I don't necessarily have a background. My mom always remodeled our houses. My dad was a school teacher, not really into the projects,
Yeah.
but so I would say I was handy when I got started. Had done some extensive remodels, things like that. But the tree house and hobbit hole, those were the first structures I was building from the ground up.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But it seems like, though, that was what your intent was, to really do this yourself. So you started out trying to do it for yourself. That was the first one.
Well, I wanted it to be a rental, but I didn't know if it would work
Yeah.
because I didn't know anybody who had used Airbnb back then. We were
Yeah.
still renting our vacation rentals out of like the thrifty nickel. And so I had no idea if it would work. I just really wanted to build a tree house in the jungle. And so my thinking was, if this rented for 8 days a month, it would replace my current factory job. I worked at a plastics factory at that time. And then if it didn't work, my friends and family had a vacation home in Hawaii. So I thought it was a win-win situation.
Wow. Well, so what is it, though, about your personality and background that made you be okay with just taking 3 days to make a decision?
I don't, it's probably a disorder of some sort.
One that you're really working with well, though, as I see.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm not really too concerned with risk. I mean, really, that is kind of the process that I still use today, even though my properties are getting bigger, is, okay, this isn't going to ruin me forever if this totally went
Right.
sideways. And then also, is this the fun thing that I want to spend the next, 6 months, year doing? And I kind of just go off of that and hope that the customers will be there, and knock on wood. So far, so good.
Yeah. And I'm sure as you moved forward, there were most of the properties you at least could see on Google Maps. This one was more of your worst case scenario is a very low down payment to have land in Hawaii, even if it's not usable.
Right. Yeah. So now I have gotten to see everything before I purchased it. But I would say typically I've kind of made my mind up before I've even got to it. And then I'm like, am I just convincing myself that this is great, or is this great?
What's the allure for you to be more, at least in terms of a lot of your beginnings, a little bit more off the grid?
Cost, really. I mean, I like the environmentalist part of me, loves being off grid. The part of me that hates when solar works until it doesn't, and then trying to get somebody to go work
Yeah.
on solar if I can't get to it. That's a bummer. I've got really good at it now with multiple. I think half of my properties are off grid, and half of them are in various states of, like whether they're hooked up to power, but maybe on a well, septics. So now I'm like pretty good at it, but really it's the cost of being out in these rural areas. And then it's just actually really beautiful as well.
I mean, in some ways, the pandemic must have fortified a little bit of what you had already been testing, because that was really a time where people wanted to get away and be far away from people, and also enjoy kind of that amenity of being off the grid or close to it.
Well, I kind of thought this scattered sort of business plan of building in all these different places. I'm on the road. I do about 60,000 miles in my truck every year, going to different places and being on a build. And I thought it was not very smart. But then when the pandemic did happen and different areas were shutting down, and Hawaii shut down for basically 2 years.
Yeah.
So it actually proved to be really smart in a global pandemic to have me be spread out and also remote.
Yeah, and I think at least one follow-up that I've seen is people haven't really backtracked on enjoying that now. They kind of it's like a more quieter pace. So have you seen that that's continued even after we're allowed out for the last couple of years?
Well, my places have always been like, I think I have a 97% occupancy rate. And so I didn't see it change a whole lot. I mean, there was the March, April of 2020, we were getting cancellations left and right. And I thought, oh, wow, this is the end. But then locals filled those in. My places aren't usually rented by locals. They're
Yeah.
people flying in to go to my places. So that's kind of just remained the same.
Let's go over the logistics though of building these really on your own or with very limited help. How did you start with that and how hard has it been, especially when you're doing it more off grid? Because then you're talking about hauling materials to the site, which is always a little bit different.
Yeah, and I am a weak little girl. So basically all day it's just me trying to haul things that I can't haul. It'd make for a really boring TV show, but every project I end up doing something completely different than the last one, and that's just because that's what interests me. So they all have their different challenges, and because they're so remote, sometimes I would like to, especially in the position that I'm in now, hire people, but I can't even get people out where I am. And then a lot of times people are impressed with how quickly I'm able to do things sometimes. And I'm like, well, yeah, I don't have to wait for the drywaller and then have
Right.
to wait for them to be done for the painter. I can just do it all. And so even though it's me working all day, every day, sometimes it goes quicker than if that was all piecemealed and I was just general contracting it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, physically, though, how difficult was it in the beginning compared to now when you kind of know the systems and know how to get stuff different ways to different places? I mean, not a lot of people are just going to get a treehouse up and think it's going to be safe right away. How did you figure that out?
So I don't think that getting the materials or physically anything has gotten easier. With the experience, what has gotten easier is the permitting, like knowing how to do zoning and permitting and stuff. That has got that much better because I didn't know anything about how to go about any of that at the beginning. So that part's much better. But still, my properties are just in such crazy places that typically, a Home Depot is like 3 hours away. And so you've got to be really deliberate with your lists because you can't just run back to town for screws.